The chandeliers sparkled like constellations above the ballroom of the Langston Hotel, casting diamond-dusted light over the sea of designer gowns and tuxedos. Laughter floated atop the swell of a string quartet, mingling with the clinking of champagne flutes and the murmurs of the wealthy elite. The annual Monroe Foundation Charity Gala had always been the social event of the season, a dazzling display of wealth, power, and perfectly curated image. But this year, something was different. The air shifted the moment she stepped through the grand double doors. Ava Monroe, the long-forgotten daughter of Gregory and Eleanor Monroe, crossed the threshold in a floor-length black velvet gown that sculpted her like it had been made from shadow and fire. Her sleek hair shimmered in waves down her back, and around her neck hung a platinum locket, a subtle heirloom once belonging to her grandmother, long presumed lost. Her eyes, no longer the wide, pleading orbs of an 18-year-old girl, were calm, unflinching, and cold as glass. She was a woman now, and she was not here to be welcomed. The crowd didn't recognize her at first. Whispers fluttered like moths as heads turned. A few gasped. A couple of socialites clutched their pearls. Literally. Is that? No, it couldn't be. She vanished. What, nearly a decade ago? Look at her, she looks rich. Gregory Monroe stiffened at the head table. His fork paused mid-air, a bite of seared lamb forgotten on his plate. Eleanor's face drained of color. Beside them, Victoria, Ava's pristine older sister, swathed in white satin, smiled nervously, her lips twitching like she had seen a ghost. But it was Cole, Ava's younger brother, who stood up first. His eyes locked on hers, and in that instant, Ava saw the boy he had been, uncertain, loyal, too kind for this world, and the man he had become. Careful, composed, and perhaps ashamed. The MC's voice crackled over the speakers, stumbling slightly before regaining composure. Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue tonight's program, we would like to take a moment to thank a very special guest. This year's gala was made possible by the extraordinary generosity of our anonymous benefactor, who has just arrived. All eyes turned toward Ava again. The MC, clearly flustered, continued, "Please welcome Miss Ava Monroe." Silence fell like a hammer. No applause, no polite smiles. Just stunned, blinking faces, trying to reconcile the name with the woman who had once been cast out of this world like a piece of forgotten luggage. Ava walked forward, each step deliberate and echoing with purpose on the marble floor. She stopped just before the head table, where her parents sat frozen in a tableau of disbelief. Her lips curved into a tight, unreadable smile. "Don't get up," she said softly, her voice smooth but with a hint of steel. "I know how much you value appearances." Victoria rose awkwardly, offering a faltering hug that Ava accepted with the grace of a stranger. Eleanor finally stood, clutching her wine glass like a lifeline. "This is unexpected," Eleanor said through a brittle smile. "You should have told us you were coming." "I didn't think I'd be invited," Ava replied coolly, "but I figured $1 million donation would get me through the door." Gregory, who had remained seated until now, slowly rose. He looked older than Ava remembered, grayer, thinner, his once commanding posture sagging beneath tailored fabric. "What do you want, Ava?" he asked, voice low and even. Ava leaned in just enough for her locket to catch the light. "To observe, and perhaps remind you that you don't control every narrative." Before he could answer, a round of applause broke out, not for the family drama unfolding, but for Ava's donation, now being announced over the PA system in crisp detail. The Monroe Foundation extends heartfelt thanks to Ava Monroe, CEO of AM Technologies, for her record-breaking contribution this evening. Gregory's eyes twitched. AM Technologies. Ava Monroe. The same company that had quietly and ruthlessly swallowed up 3 of Monroe Tech's former contracts in the past year. He hadn't connected the dots. Until now, Ava turned away without another word and let herself vanish into the crowd. leaving behind only the scent of her perfume and a lingering taste of dread in her father's mouth. The prodigal daughter had returned. But she hadn't come home, she had come to begin. The Monroe estate hadn't changed. That was the first thing Ava noticed as she stepped onto the black and white marble foyer that once felt like a palace, and now felt more like a museum curated to bury truth under gold-leafed lies. Same crystal chandelier. Same hand-carved balustrade climbing toward the second floor. Same massive oil portraits lining the hall. Monroe's staring down from gilded frames, as if daring her to question their legacy. She could still hear the echo of her younger self, begging her father in that very hallway, her voice cracking as she asked why she couldn't go to college like the rest of her classmates. The walls, she was sure, remembered every word. Now, years later, Ava stood straighter as the housekeeper took her coat. She offered no explanation for her unannounced visit, and no one asked. The staff, trained in silence, exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. It was the kind of place where emotions were dry cleaned out of existence. She wandered the halls with quiet purpose, passing the music room where she once played piano, the East Wing where the family held lavish Christmas parties, and finally the solarium, her mother's favorite space, all glass and light, now dull with dust. She paused before the largest portrait of them all, Gregory Monroe at age 50, posed with one hand on a globe and the other tucked into his blazer, like a monarch ruling an empire of innovation and iron will. She used to admire that painting. Now she saw it for what it was, a monument to control. Ava turned away, but something caught her eye. A door, partially ajar, one she hadn't noticed before. It had always blended into the wood-paneled hallway, a small utility room perhaps, or a forgotten closet. Curiosity prickled at her spine. She stepped in. Inside was a narrow staircase leading downward, lit by a dim bulb that buzzed like it resented being disturbed. She descended slowly, each step groaning beneath her, until she reached the basement level, cool, dry, and filled with storage crates and archival boxes. And then she saw it, a wooden trunk. Scratched, unlabeled, tucked behind several sealed crates of old wine. She pried it open. Inside, wrapped in yellowing linen and sealed plastic sleeves, were stacks of notebooks. Ava recognized the delicate, looping cursive at once. Maria Vasquez, her childhood nanny. Maria had disappeared shortly after Ava was thrown out. She remembered the tearful goodbye, a rushed hug, whispered promises to stay in touch. But the number Maria gave her never worked. Ava had assumed she'd been silenced or paid off. She hadn't expected this. The journals were dated, neatly, obsessively. Ava pulled one at random and opened it. Gregory told Eleanor she had to go along with the decision. I heard them fighting in the study. Cut her off, he said. She's getting too curious. Independence will keep her out of our business. Eleanor cried. She said it was too harsh. He said it was necessary. Ava's throat tightened. Her vision blurred slightly, but she kept reading. Ava asked about the locked room again. She thinks it's just an office, but I know it's more. I overheard them talking about a second account. Eleanor is afraid someone will find out it was in Ava's name. What account? What locked room? She flipped faster now, devouring page after page. Mentions of hush money, a cover-up following a boating accident when Ava was 12. Maria's suspicions about the family's finances. A cryptic note. If anything happens to me, I've hidden the key in Ava's old sketchbook, the one with the sunflower on the front. She always loved sunflowers. Ava froze. That sketchbook, she remembered it. She used to doodle in it for hours, left it behind when she was kicked out. Her heart pounded. Upstairs she moved quickly, retracing her steps to her childhood bedroom. The door creaked open, revealing a room frozen in time. The wallpaper was faded, the furniture untouched. But the shelves were still full of forgotten books and binders, arranged with chilling precision. There it was. tucked between old textbooks, a soft-covered sketchbook with a fading sunflower sticker on the front. She opened it. A few childhood drawings. A poem she wrote at 13. Then, taped to the inside back cover, a tiny brass key. Her fingers curled around it, her pulse roaring in her ears. Something had been locked away for years. Something they never meant her to find. And now, Ava was closer than ever. The brass key was cold in Ava's palm. As she sat alone in her childhood bedroom, the door shut tight behind her. It felt almost absurd, this tiny object, weightless and rusted, holding the potential to unravel a lie that had rewritten the course of her life. Her hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with anticipation. She spent the next hour scouring the house for any room or cabinet the key might belong to. Hallway closets, locked drawers, even an old jewelry box in her mother's dressing room. Nothing fit. Then she remembered Maria's journal. She thinks it's just an office. The study. Gregory's private study had always been forbidden. Even as children, Ava and Cole were shooed away from its heavy mahogany door, as though secrets buzzed too loudly behind it to risk discovery. Gregory had claimed it was where he did business, and Eleanor, ever obedient, never allowed anyone inside without permission. Now the door stood before her like a sealed vault. She waited until late evening, when the house had quieted and the staff had mostly retired. She listened. No footsteps, no whispers, no clinking of glasses or idle gossip. Ava slipped inside. The study smelled of leather and old smoke, the scent of legacy and control. Books lined the walls, every spine a symbol of power. Economics, law, military history. A low fire crackled in the hearth. And in the far corner, there it was. A locked cabinet beneath the bookshelves. She knelt, heart pounding, and inserted the brass key. It turned smoothly. Inside was a small safe, black and digital. But tucked behind it was a file folder, bound in a red ribbon. Faded, but unmistakably untouched for years. On the front, one word in Gregory's handwriting. Ava Monroe. Ava's breath caught. She opened the folder slowly, almost reverently. Inside were crisp financial statements, trust documents, and wire receipts. Her eyes scanned the details. Some familiar, others shocking. There had been a college fund. A trust created shortly after her birth, with steady contributions each year until she turned 17. Then, nothing. At 18, the entire balance, $317,000, had been withdrawn in a single offshore transaction. The destination, a numbered bank account in the Cayman Islands. The signatures authorizing the transfer? Gregory Monroe, Eleanor Monroe, C.M. Her brow furrowed. C.M.? Not Cole? His full name was Cole Alexander Monroe. Could this be someone else? An alias? A silent partner? She flipped to a second document. Emails printed and highlighted in yellow. The conversation was clinical. Brief. Cold. Asset diverted as instructed. Ava has been isolated. CM confirmed. Do not contact again via this channel. She set the papers down, pulse throbbing. It hadn't been about independence. Or tough love. It had been a strategy. Isolation. Diversion. Words used for damage control. For corporate enemies. Not for a daughter. Ava clenched her fists. They had stolen her future with surgical precision. And for what? To hide something? To silence her? To eliminate her from the family business without a scene? Her eyes fell on the safe again. It wasn't digital after all, just a clever facade. She pressed against the edge and heard a soft click as a false panel fell open. Inside, more files, a thumb drive, and a yellowing envelope marked Confidential, 2004. She pocketed the drive and opened the envelope carefully. It contained a notarized agreement, an internal Monroe family settlement, signed by her grandfather before his death. In the event of legal dispute, Ava Monroe is not to be named as a financial beneficiary or stakeholder in Monroe Enterprises. Her inheritance is to be held in abeyance, contingent on silence and cooperation. She staggered back. Her own grandfather had written her out, before she was even old enough to understand what any of it meant. Her inheritance had been conditional silence. Everything was orchestrated. Her college fund, her exile, even the lack of communication afterward. They hadn't just refused her, they'd erased her, paper by paper, line by line. But they'd made one mistake. They'd underestimated her will to return, and they'd left behind a trail, believing she'd never be smart enough, or powerful enough, to follow it. Now she had the documents, the receipts, the signatures. And the name CM burned in her mind like a fuse. Whatever this was, it went deeper than her. Ava closed the cabinet, tucked the folder under her coat, and left the study with one final glance at her father's portrait glaring down from the wall. The hunt had just begun. It was nearing midnight when Ava found Cole alone on the terrace, nursing a glass of whiskey beneath a moonless sky. The garden stretched out before them in silence, overgrown but still elegant, with tendrils of ivy creeping up the balustrade like nature reclaiming the ruins of a once golden dynasty. Cole didn't flinch when she approached. "I figured you'd find me eventually," he said, his voice low and thick with something she couldn't yet name. Regret, maybe. Or guilt. Ava leaned on the cold stone railing beside him, staring at the darkness between the hedges. "Why didn't you call me?" she asked quietly. "After I left." He took a long sip of whiskey. "Because I was a coward." Ava didn't respond right away. The silence between them stretched across the years they'd lost. "I was 16, Cole continued, his voice breaking slightly. "Dad threatened to pull me from school, cut me off if I so much as mentioned your name. Said you were poisoned by entitlement. Said you needed to hit rock bottom to build character. I didn't know what to believe." "You believed him," Ava said, her tone sharper than she intended. Cole nodded once. "For a while, yeah. But then, I started finding things. Bits of conversations. Bank statements. Maria's disappearance. It didn't add up, and I think part of me always knew, deep down, that they lied to you." Ava turned to face him fully now. "Then why didn't you do anything?" "I tried," he whispered. "I really did." She studied his face. The soft innocence he'd carried as a boy had hardened into something weary. His eyes, once full of mischief, now carried a shadow she didn't recognize. "What happened, Cole?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. His hand shook slightly as he set down the glass. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, voice hollow. "Something I've never said out loud. Not to anyone." Ava felt the air tighten. "Do you remember Rachel?" he asked. She blinked. "Rachel Hastings? My best friend?" Cole nodded. The name sliced through her like glass. Rachel, the girl who had been her other half. The girl who had mysteriously vanished one summer night after a party on the family's lake property. Authorities called it a drowning, but the body was never found. Ava had blamed herself for years. She'd been grounded that night. Hadn't gone to the party. Rachel had gone alone. Ava thought maybe Rachel had run away. Maybe she'd fallen. Maybe... "I was there," Cole said suddenly, and Ava's stomach dropped. "What?" "That night. I snuck out. There was drinking, music, the usual. Rachel was upset about something she overheard." Ava's pulse roared in her ears. She said she heard Dad and Uncle Charles arguing in the boathouse. About money. About you. She said they were hiding something huge. Something that could destroy the family. Cole looked up at her now, his eyes haunted. "She said she was going to tell you. Said you deserved to know." "What happened?" Ava whispered. "She went down to the docks. Said she was going to confront them. I followed, but I wasn't fast enough." His voice broke. "There was yelling, a splash. I ran toward the sound, but by the time I got there, Rachel was gone. And Dad, he was just standing there, soaked, furious. He grabbed me, told me if I said anything he'd ruin my life. that he'd already made the situation go away. Ava felt her knees weaken. You think he killed her? Cole nodded, slowly. Or covered for someone who did. Ava pressed a hand to her mouth. Rachel hadn't run away. She hadn't drowned. She'd been silenced. Because she got too close to something. You should have told me, Ava said through clenched teeth. I couldn't, Cole choked. I've been blackmailed ever since. He has something on me. Pictures, emails, he's kept me on a leash for years. What kind of pictures? She asked. He looked away. It doesn't matter. What matters is, Rachel died because she tried to help you. And I've been living with that every day since. Ava stood in stunned silence, the cold night air suddenly razor-sharp against her skin. Her father had orchestrated everything. Her exile, Rachel's disappearance, Cole's silence, all for what? What truth was so terrible that a girl had to die and a son had to be shackled? I'm not running anymore, she said softly. Cole looked at her. Then be careful, Ava. Because if you're getting close, he'll come for you too. The announcement came over brunch. Casual, unassuming, delivered like a press release slipped into conversation between coffee refills and perfectly plated eggs Benedict. We've decided to make it official, Gregory said, dabbing his mouth with a linen napkin. Jason will be stepping in as the interim vice president of Monroe Enterprises. Eventually, he'll take over. Ava's fork paused midair. Jason? She echoed, her tone measured. Across the table, Jason smiled. He was tall, clean-cut, and devastatingly polished, an image of curated charisma with just enough humility to seem approachable. The type of man bred in boardrooms, not born into them. Surprised? Victoria asked sweetly, dousing her fruit in syrup. Father says he's the perfect fit. He's been shadowing him for years now. Shadowing? Ava repeated, turning her gaze back to Gregory. That's an interesting word choice. So many shadows in this family. Gregory ignored the barb. Jason's got the vision, the discipline, and the bloodline. Ava's eyes narrowed. Jason, sensing the tension, leaned forward slightly. I know this may come as a shock, Ava, especially given your return, but I hope we can work together. For the future of the family. She gave him a thin smile. Of course, I'm always eager to learn about family. The rest of brunch blurred into a dull hum of chatter and clinking glassware, but Ava's mind was racing. Jason had been introduced years ago as a distant cousin from Eleanor's side, an orphan child taken in after a tragedy no one ever spoke of. At the time, Ava had been too heartbroken and too far removed to care. But now, with secrets unraveling all around her, his rise to power felt too convenient to ignore. Later that evening, she pulled Cole aside in the garage, where the security cameras didn't reach. Who is he really? She asked. Cole hesitated. They always said he was adopted, some second cousin from Eleanor's dead uncle. But I never bought it. You think he's a plant? I think he's something else entirely, Ava nodded. Then we need proof. She already had a plan forming. A few calls, a quiet favor from her CTO, and a courier. Within 48 hours, she had what she needed. A DNA testing kit and a family brush from the bathroom trash, still tangled with Jason's immaculate blonde hair. A few swabs. A courier envelope. And then the wait. When the results came, Ava read them alone under the dim glow of her hotel suite desk lamp. Subject A and Subject B share a 99.9% genetic match as half-siblings. Her breath left her body. Jason wasn't a cousin. He was Gregory's son. And not Eleanor's. She stared at the paper, mind unraveling. Her father had not only hidden an affair, he'd brought the child of that affair into their home, raised him under a false identity, and then chosen him to carry the Monroe legacy. Over Ava, over Cole, even over Victoria. The betrayal stung deeper than she'd imagined possible. This wasn't just business. This was surgical erasure. Her own father had cut her out, and replaced her with the son of his affair, dressed it up in a narrative of corporate succession, and fed it to the world as legacy. She remembered how Eleanor had become distant in the years following Ava's exile, how she had aged rapidly, how she barely looked Ava in the eye even now. Had she known all along? Or had she been broken by the same betrayal? Ava's hands trembled as she folded the report. She couldn't let this go public yet, not until she understood why. Not until she had Jason alone, and answers in hand. She arranged a meeting. Late that night, in a quiet corner of the estate's library, Jason arrived with his usual cool smile and confident stride. "You wanted to talk?" he asked. Ava handed him the sealed envelope. Jason read in silence. No visible reaction, just the slightest stiffening of his jaw. "So," she said evenly, "you're not who they say you are. And you knew." "I did," he replied calmly. "But I also know this family eats its own. So I made myself indispensable." Ava stepped closer. "You took everything I was denied. My father, my future, my place." Jason didn't flinch. "Then take it back." Ava stared at him. "I didn't ask for this," he added, "but I won't apologize for surviving the way I had to." It wasn't a confession, it was a challenge. And Ava, heart-pounding, fire-building, knew the game had changed. The Monroes hadn't just lied, they had rewritten blood itself. The past had a scent. For Ava, it was cedarwood cologne and the faint citrus bite of lemon zest, the exact notes lingering on the collar of Liam Wexler's tailored jacket as he reached past her at the wine bar of the Bellevue Club. It hit her before his voice did. "You still take yours dry, no garnish?" She turned slowly, and there he was, Liam, her first love, her last heartbreak, the boy who used to write code in her dorm room and kiss her shoulders when she fell asleep at her desk. Now a man, polished, confident, handsome in the way money makes men more dangerous. His smile was practiced, but his eyes faltered the second they met hers. "Ava," he said, breathless. She should have walked away. She had promised herself she would. But memory was a drug, and Liam had once been her addiction. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "This is my club," he said. "Or Victoria's, technically." Ava's lips tightened. "Of course." They stood in silence, tension twisting between them like a live wire. Ava could hear her heartbeat in her ears. She hated how easily the years fell away in his presence, how the ache she buried 9 years ago resurfaced like a wound torn open by a familiar knife. "I didn't know you were back," he said, softer now. "Now you do." "I would have called." "No," she cut in, "you wouldn't have." He looked wounded for a moment. "I never stopped thinking about you, Ava." "And yet," she said, her voice slicing through the warmth, "you're engaged to my sister." Liam looked down, ashamed. "It's complicated." "No," Ava said. "It's cruel, but familiar." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "You have no idea what it was like after you left. Your father, your family. I know exactly what they're like," she snapped. "That's why I left. Why I had to fight tooth and nail just to breathe outside of their shadow." She stepped closer, her voice low and dangerous. "But you stayed. You played their game. And now you're marrying into it." His jaw tightened. "You think I wanted this? I was trying to survive." "So was I," she hissed. "Except I did it without selling out." Their eyes locked. Pain, anger, something older, more fragile. And then he whispered, "I'm sorry." It landed with a thud in her chest. Too late. Too convenient. She turned to leave, but he grabbed her wrist gently. "Wait, there's something you don't know." Ava hesitated. Liam's eyes flicked around the empty bar. He leaned in. "I knew about your college fund." Her stomach dropped. "What?" "I overheard Gregory talking to your mother, something about closing the account before you turned 18. I didn't think much of it at the time. until after you left. Then he offered me a job, quietly, said if I stayed close to the family, I'd never want for anything. Ava's pulse roared in her ears. You knew they cut me off for reasons that had nothing to do with independence, she said, her voice shaking. And you took his offer anyway? I thought I could protect you better from inside, he said. But you were already gone. Ava laughed bitterly. You didn't try to find me. You didn't ask questions. You cashed the checks and moved on. He looked broken now. I was scared. And now? She asked. He didn't answer, just stared at her, like a man watching his last chance slip through his fingers. You're part of this now, Liam, she said. Part of the lie. And no matter how you try to spin it, loving me doesn't erase what you let happen. A long pause. I can help you, he finally said. There are files, documents. Your father kept a log. I know where it is. Ava narrowed her eyes. Why now? Because I was wrong, he whispered. And because marrying Victoria doesn't feel like victory. It feels like punishment. Ava said nothing. She walked away that night without looking back, unsure if Liam was trying to make things right, or simply protect himself, now that the foundation beneath the Monroes was beginning to crack. But either way, she knew one thing for certain. Love hadn't saved her then, and it wouldn't save her now. It was supposed to be a quiet afternoon. The Monroe estate was unusually still. No staff moving about, no clatter of china in the dining room, no distant echo of piano keys. Ava wandered the second floor alone, the heels of her boots soft against the thick carpet, every turn feeling like a hallway she shouldn't be in. She hadn't planned to confront her mother that day, but the words had been festering since the files, the confession, and Liam's broken truths. Ava had tried to see her mother as a bystander in Gregory's machinations, an accomplice by silence, not design. But silence is rarely innocent. Eleanor Monroe sat in her reading room, draped in silk the color of mourning doves, her hands wrapped tightly around a porcelain teacup she hadn't touched. She looked almost delicate now, her cheekbones sharper, her frame thinner, her eyes far off, like she'd spent the past decade fading. You knew, Ava said softly. Eleanor blinked slowly, as if waking from a dream. About the college fund, Ava continued. About the trust. About Jason. The porcelain cup trembled faintly in Eleanor's grip. You don't have to say anything, Ava said, stepping further into the room, because I already know. But what I don't understand is why. Why go along with it? Why let him do that to me? Eleanor finally looked at her daughter, really looked at her. You think I had a choice? She said, her voice brittle but sharp. You think I didn't fight him? Ava froze. It wasn't denial. It wasn't even anger. It was exhaustion. He said you agreed to it, Ava whispered. Eleanor's laugh was bitter. Gregory doesn't ask for agreement. He demands it. And when he doesn't get it, he finds ways to make obedience feel like self-preservation. A long pause stretched between them. Ava's heart pounded. So you gave up on me, she said quietly. I tried to protect you the only way I could, Eleanor replied, her voice wavering. By distancing myself. By making you forget me. Because if you stayed, he would have destroyed you. Tears burned behind Ava's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. There's still more, isn't there? Ava asked. About the trust. The settlement in my name. What aren't you telling me? Eleanor hesitated, then reached for a manila envelope in a drawer beneath her side table. There was another clause, she said. One I never signed. One your grandfather had hidden in a vault. Gregory found it after his death. She handed the envelope to Ava. Inside was a single sheet of paper, an amendment to Ava's original trust. A clause that named her as primary successor to Monroe Enterprises, in the event of Gregory's retirement or incapacitation. Her breath caught. That would have made me the heir, Ava whispered. Eleanor nodded. But only if you stayed compliant, silent, controlled. When you started asking questions, when you stopped playing the role he gave you, he panicked. He knew you'd never toe the line. So he erased me, Ava said, her voice hollow. And replaced you, Eleanor murmured. Ava's fingers tightened around the paper. I should have burned it when I had the chance, Eleanor added, closing her eyes. I thought if I hid it, maybe one day you could come back. But you didn't hide it, Ava said. He found it, just like he found a way to use it against me. Eleanor opened her eyes and reached out as if to take Ava's hand, but before she could touch her, a loud crash echoed through the hallway. Ava spun around. The sound had come from the east wing. She ran, Eleanor following close behind. Down the corridor, past the stairwell, to Eleanor's private suite. The door was ajar. Inside, drawers were flung open, jewelry scattered across the floor. The safe, embedded in the wall behind a painting, was wide open. Empty. What the hell? Ava muttered, stepping inside. Eleanor gasped, rushing to the safe. The trust files, they were in here. The originals. Everything. Gone. Ava's blood ran cold. Someone had broken in. And taken everything. Who else knew about this safe? Ava asked. Eleanor shook her head. Just me. And Gregory. Ava's mind raced. Or someone Gregory told. Someone with a motive to cover tracks. Ava turned slowly, heart pounding. This wasn't a burglary. This was a cleanup. And someone was trying to make sure that trust, and everything it revealed, vanished. Just like Rachel. Just like Maria. Just like the truth. The estate had quieted again. Too quiet, Ava thought. After the break-in, Gregory insisted it had been an opportunistic thief. Probably a disgruntled staff member, he'd muttered, brushing off Eleanor's pale panic and refusing to involve the police. Ava didn't argue. She had stopped expecting logic from him. But something about the violation didn't sit right. The safe hadn't just been emptied, it had been targeted. Someone knew exactly what to take. That night, Ava found herself drawn back to the library, unable to sleep. The smell of old paper, wood polish, and dust soothed her in a strange, hollow way. It was one of the few rooms in the estate where Gregory's fingerprints didn't saturate every inch. The air felt different here. Older. Less manipulated. She moved past the shelves of first editions and legal manuals and paused at the far wall, where her grandfather's prized possessions still stood. A tall, antique grandfather clock, encased in rosewood with delicate brass detailing. It had always fascinated her as a child. Grandfather Monroe would sit her on his knee and tell her stories about how the clock came from Austria, smuggled through war, passed through generations. It was said to be more than a timekeeper, a phrase that stuck with her long after he died. Ava stepped closer. The pendulum swayed silently now, but she noticed the glass was slightly fogged from the inside. The hands of the clock were frozen at 9:17. Strange, she thought. The estate's staff were meticulous about maintenance. She opened the case, revealing the gears. A small brass plaque inside caught her eye. She'd never seen it before. It read, "For those who hear what others silence. J.M. Joseph Monroe." Her grandfather. Her pulse quickened. She began probing the mechanism gently, afraid to break anything. That's when her fingers brushed against a panel at the base. Not quite flush with the wood. She pressed it. A soft click sounded, followed by a hiss of release. The panel slid open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, a velvet pouch, a small USB drive, and a slim, leather-bound journal marked simply with the letter M. Ava's hands trembled as she took everything to her room and locked the door behind her. She started with the journal. It was written in her grandfather's unmistakable scrawl. Sparse, clean, methodical. It read less like a diary and more like a ledger of secrets. Meetings. Warnings. Concerns about Gregory's ambition. about money that kept disappearing, reappearing under shell companies, about using Ava's name for tax sheltering and off-the-books investment vehicles. Gregory's made Ava the shadow key to hide our illegal transfers. She'll never know, of course. Eleanor suspects but doesn't want to face it. I'm beginning to think I'm the only one left with a conscience in this damn house, Ava gasped. Her own identity had been weaponized, used as a tool for financial crime. She flipped pages with growing horror. Her name appeared again and again, on accounts, trusts, even offshore property in her name. CM has grown more reckless. He says Rachel asked questions. There it was again. That name. CM. She knew now it wasn't Cole. She had seen the paperwork. She knew it wasn't anyone obvious. But in the back of her mind, a theory began forming, dark, absurd, and impossible to ignore. Jason? She bookmarked the thought and inserted the USB drive into her laptop. It whirred to life and opened a series of neatly labeled folders. The first was dated 2004. Inside, video footage, surveillance from inside the estate, her grandfather's study, meetings between Gregory and a man Ava didn't recognize. Bald, sharp-eyed, dangerous. They discussed asset control, restructuring offshore holdings, and laundering through foreign educational trusts. Then, a video of Rachel. 12 seconds. Grainy. A security cam on the lakefront boathouse. Rachel walking alone, head down. Then, another figure steps into frame, unmistakable even in shadows. Gregory Monroe. The video cut out before anything happened. Ava slammed her laptop shut. The room seemed to spin around her. Rachel hadn't just disappeared. She'd found something tied to Ava. To the trusts. To Gregory's secret empire of fraud. And she had paid for it. Ava rose, heart pounding. The clock. The journal. The video. They weren't just evidence. They were a roadmap to destruction. And it had all been right here, buried beneath dust and time, waiting for her to find it. But now the question remained. What would she do with it? The invitation arrived on embossed Monroe letterhead, sealed in wax. Formal, traditional, ominous. Monroe family dinner, attendance required, location. The West Dining Room, 7 p.m. sharp. Ava stood at the threshold of the room she once associated with childhood holidays and strained pleasantries, now transformed into a stage for war. The long, gleaming mahogany tables stretched beneath chandeliers dripping with crystals, each one catching the light like teeth. The family was already seated when she entered. Gregory at the head, ice in his stare. Eleanor at his side, ghostly in lavender silk, wrists faintly trembling. Victoria, smug and tight-lipped, clinking her wine glass against Liam's. Jason, flawless as always, seated opposite Cole, who looked pale and jittery, glancing everywhere but at Ava. Every chair filled, every player in place. Ava took the empty seat directly across from her father. She said nothing. Let's dispense with the niceties, Gregory began, cutting into his filet mignon. You've made quite the return, Ava. Press buzzing. Board members calling. You've become a topic. I've always been a topic, she said coolly. You just preferred me silent. His lip twitched. I thought tonight would be a good time to reset expectations, Gregory continued. As a family. Ava leaned back, slowly removing a small leather folder from her handbag and placing it on the table like a weapon. I was thinking the same, she said. The room fell still. She opened the folder and began sliding its contents down the table, page by page. Wire transfers, trust documents, DNA test results, copies of Maria's journals, a still frame from the Rachel video. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. Victoria's fork clattered onto her plate. Jason stiffened, jaw tight. Gregory said nothing. I think it's time we all knew the truth, Ava said, voice calm, razor-edged. About the real heir. About the money. About the girl who died trying to protect me. About the empire you built on stolen names and silenced voices. Jason stood abruptly. This is madness. Oh, sit down, Ava snapped. You don't even know what name to answer to. Jason's eyes flashed with fury, but he sat barely. I've got every document I need, Ava continued. Banking records, legal statements, footage, enough to dismantle this entire house of lies. She turned to her mother. Did you know what they did with my name? What they hid in my trust? Eleanor shook her head, lips parted in silent horror. Ava turned to Liam. And you? You knew about the fund. About the lies. You married your way into security while I was sleeping on park benches. He had no words, and then finally, Ava faced her father. I used to think you cut me off because you wanted to teach me a lesson. But that wasn't it, was it? You needed me gone because I was the only person with a legal claim to the Monroe legacy that you couldn't control. Gregory wiped his mouth slowly, then folded his hands. You're smarter than I gave you credit for, he said. You used me, Ava whispered. You laundered money through my name. Let my best friend die. Let my brother rot in guilt. You turned your mistress's son into your successor and threw the rest of us away like we were liabilities. Gregory's calm never broke. Is this your grand finale? He asked. Your revenge? Ava's eyes burned. No, this is justice. But then Gregory smiled, cold, calculated. And what if I told you, he said softly, that your tech empire, the one you built so righteously, so far from our poison, was seeded by Monroe money? Ava's breath caught. What are you talking about? He leaned forward, voice barely a whisper now. Your first investor, Blackridge Partners, shell company. Guess who funded it? She stared at him, horrified. You, she said. No, Gregory said. You. You unknowingly used Monroe Capital to build your house of glass. And now, if I fall, so does everything you've built. Her world swayed. You're lying, he shrugged. Prove it wrong, or don't. But make no mistake. If you take me down, you take yourself with me. Ava's fingers trembled. She had cornered him, exposed him. But he'd found a way to chain her back to him. By blood, by paper, by strategy. The table was silent again, but this time, it wasn't suspense. It was checkmate. At least for now. The wind off the cliffs was sharp that night, slicing through Ava's coat as she stood at the edge of the Monroe estate's back terrace, staring down at the moonlit sea. The waves below crashed with mechanical rhythm, each one sounding like a countdown. Behind her, the empire she had nearly brought to its knees stood as it always had, grand, cold, and built on secrets. She held the USB drive in her gloved hands like it was a grenade. It contained everything: the money laundering, the trust manipulation, the video of Rachel. It had taken her months, years, really, to piece it all together, and yet one truth haunted her more than any of it. Gregory had been right. The investor that launched her tech company, Blackridge Partners, had been a Monroe shell. Her success had come with blood-soaked money. The seed of her independence had been tainted from the start. It was the perfect trap. If she exposed him, the Monroe name would collapse and her company would go with it. Investors would flee. Lawsuits would follow. She'd be accused of complicity or negligence. Her reputation would shatter. If she stayed quiet, Gregory would survive. Jason would inherit. And the cycle would begin again. So she did the only thing she could. She called the fire department and gave them a warning. Anonymous. Encrypted. Said there was a gas leak in the Monroe estate. Said they had 2 hours. Then she walked back inside. The house was quiet. Unnaturally so. Most of the staff had been dismissed early for the weekend. Eleanor was already asleep, sedated after her anxiety had spiraled post-dinner. Cole had left, said he needed air, but Ava knew it was shame driving him into the dark. Through the hallways, stopping at the portrait gallery. Gregory's face hung largest, framed in gold, cold eyes. Square jaw, god complex. Ava stood in front of it with a gas can in one hand and a lighter in the other. You built this place on lies, she whispered. Let's see if it burns as easily as the truth. She doused the curtains, the carpet, the ancient oak walls. She didn't have to torch the whole house. Just enough. Just the east wing, the study, the library, the vaults, the rooms where sins were stored like heirlooms. She flicked the lighter. The fire caught fast. It leapt up the velvet drapes and raced toward the portraits like it was hungry for history. By the time the alarm finally shrieked to life, Ava was already outside, breathless, silhouetted against the red glow. Flames danced through the windows like ghosts set free. Smoke poured out in thick black plumes. Sirens howled in the distance. And then, chaos. Gregory emerged from the front doors, coughing, shouting for someone to call the fire chief directly. Jason stumbled out after him, clutching a leather briefcase, eyes wild. Eleanor stood in a silk robe near the fountain, dazed, barefoot in the grass. Cole ran from the driveway, grabbing her as ash began to fall. Ava stood apart from them all, watching. Jason spotted her first. You, he hissed, stepping forward. You did this. Prove it, Ava said softly. Gregory turned toward her, smoke curling around him like shadow. Is this your legacy? He asked, voice cracking. Burning it all down? No, she said. He sneered. You've doomed yourself too. Ava met his gaze. Not yet. She reached into her coat pocket and held up the USB. This is the only copy, she said, and I'm not giving it to the press. Not today. His eyes narrowed. What do you want? Control, she said, of my company, of my name, of everything you stole. You disappear. Jason disappears. And in exchange, this, she shook the USB, vanishes. He stared at her, then laughed. You've learned well. No, she said, turning her back on him. I've learned better. She dropped the USB into the flames of the garden's fire pit without looking back. It sizzled, sparked, and was gone. But she hadn't lied. That was a copy. Not the copy. The real one was encrypted and buried in a server in Zurich, locked behind 2 dead man switches. If anything happened to her, or if Gregory broke their silent agreement, it would go live to every major news outlet and legal body in the country. He could burn records. He could silence threats. But he couldn't silence her anymore. As the fire swallowed the East Wing and firefighters finally arrived, Ava walked away from the Monroe estate with nothing but her coat, her name, and her truth. Behind her, generations of secrets turned to smoke. In front of her, a new legacy waited to be written.